She was 84 years old. She lived inside one of the most monitored, most secure residential communities in southern Arizona. She had a pacemaker tracking her heartbeat and an Apple Watch on her wrist. Her neighborhood had cameras, motion sensors, and gated access. And on the night of January 31st, 2026, none of it was enough. Nancy Guthrie, mother of nationally known television anchor Savannah Guthrie, was taken from her home in the Catalina Foothills north of Tucson, not by accident, not by confusion, by force. The evidence confirmed it early. The Nest doorbell camera mounted at the front of her home was physically ripped from the wall. Blood was later confirmed to be hers, found on the stone steps of the front entryway. Her phone and purse were left inside the house. So was her medication. The back doors were found propped open. And at 2:28 in the morning, Nancy's pacemaker stopped transmitting its scheduled signal. Her Apple Watch went dark at the same time. She has not been seen since. As of this broadcast, today marks day 68 of the search. There are no named suspects, no confirmed sightings, no arrest. A reward totaling more than $1 million offered by her family remains unclaimed. The investigation, led by the Pima County Sheriff's Department in coordination with the FBI, continues. But new questions about how that investigation has been conducted are now competing for attention with the search itself. And this week, as this case entered its 10th week without resolution, the developments did not stop. A SWAT team executed a search in Tucson. A DNA expert told investigators a potential breakthrough may be closer than previously understood. New ransom notes arrived. And the sheriff leading the investigation found himself facing fresh public scrutiny over a firearm incident from 2024 that until recently had never been made public. This is where the case stands today. This is part 1 of 5. To understand the pace and posture of this investigation, you have to start with what happened in the first hours. Nancy was dropped off at her home on the evening of January 31st at approximately 9:50 in the evening by her son-in-law. The garage door closed, he drove away. The family expected nothing unusual. At 1:47 the following morning, a masked individual appeared at her front door on the doorbell camera. Surveillance footage released by the FBI showed the person attempting to knock the camera from its mount, then using foliage from a potted plant on the porch to cover the lens. At 2:28 in the morning, the pacemaker transmission stopped. Between those two timestamps, 41 minutes elapsed. When Nancy's daughter and son-in-law arrived the next morning after she failed to appear for a virtual church service she never missed, the house was immaculate. No overturned furniture, no shattered glass. The bed was neatly made. The only visible disruption was the blood near the front door, discovered not by law enforcement first, but by a reporter who noticed it on the steps. That detail alone set the tone for what would follow. The first public criticism of this investigation did not come from outside the community. It came from within it. Former Surgeon General Richard Carmona, a resident of the same Catalina Foothills neighborhood, was among the first outside voices to publicly express alarm about how the early hours of the disappearance were handled. He was not alone. Within days, retired law enforcement professionals, former FBI agents, and forensic analysts were appearing across national media with the same central concern. The first investigators on the scene treated this as a search and rescue situation rather than an abduction. According to people with direct knowledge of the early response, investigators settled almost immediately on a theory that Nancy had wandered from her home, despite her age, her pacemaker, her medication dependency, and the high-security nature of her neighborhood. Based on that working assumption, the property was not treated from the beginning as a primary crime scene. The tape came down. The scene was returned to the family. When the blood droplets on the steps were identified and confirmed to belong to Nancy, law enforcement had to reverse course. The FBI stepped in. The property was reprocessed. But by then, family members, neighbors, and others had walked through. Evidence that might have been preserved had been exposed to days of foot traffic. A retired law enforcement official speaking on condition of anonymity said that investigators were given the information they needed to treat this as a criminal abduction from the beginning and did not act on it with the appropriate urgency. He said the supervisor assigned to lead the investigation had, according to available information, never overseen a homicide case prior to this one. The Pima County Sheriff's Department has disputed characterizations that the scene was mishandled. Sheriff Chris Nanos said publicly in recent days that he does not believe any mistakes were made and that his department has been working thousands of hours. "You cannot attack my department," he told a local television station this week. Discrediting an investigation like this doesn't help anything. But the scrutiny did not stop with the crime scene. This week, a report surfaced about an incident from November 2024. more than a year before Nancy Guthrie disappeared. According to an incident report obtained by a national news organization, a TSA X-ray technician at Tucson International Airport's Beacon course discovered a loaded, undeclared firearm inside Sheriff Nanos' carry-on luggage. The gun had 5 rounds in the magazine and 1 round chambered. The first officer who responded to the scene recused himself due to an apparent conflict of interest. A second officer brought Nanos to a private screening room, removed the weapon, and required the sheriff to secure it before continuing his travel. No criminal charges were filed. A Tucson resident and community advocate named Corey Stevens put the public reaction plainly. He said that if a private citizen had encountered that situation at the airport, the consequences would have been significantly greater. He said the community wants answers, and that the safety of the community is at stake. A spokesperson for the sheriff's department said Nanos was made aware of an internal investigation's results, that the findings did not support allegations of bullying, but noted additional concerns, and that the sheriff had requested the full report for review. The Pima County Board of Supervisors this week formally demanded answers from the sheriff on several matters, including the airport incident, questions about his prior work history, and reports of budget overruns within the department. A recall effort against Nanos, fueled by community members who feel the Guthrie investigation was mishandled, has continued to gather signatures. The sheriff remains in his position. The investigation continues under his department's lead, even as questions about leadership mounted. Investigators this week took 2 concrete steps that generated significant attention. On Thursday, a team that included SWAT officers, federal agents, and Pima County prosecutors arrived without advance notice at Nancy Guthrie's home in the Catalina Foothills. Tinted black SUVs arrived at the front. Prosecutors, visibly distinct from the law enforcement agents accompanying them, walked the perimeter of the house, front and back. One vehicle pulled around the side of the property, entered through the garage, and remained inside with the garage door closed for approximately 1 hour. It then drove away without the waiting cameras capturing who had been inside. Law enforcement has not publicly explained the purpose of the visit. The presence of prosecutors specifically, rather than investigators or forensic technicians, was noted as significant by several analysts monitoring the case. Prosecutors typically enter a crime scene when they are preparing to build a legal case, not simply to observe. Their presence at this stage of the investigation suggests that whatever evidence law enforcement has collected over the past 68 days, some of it may now be moving toward a prosecutorial framework. No statement accompanied the visit. The second development this week involved DNA, and it may prove to be the more consequential of the two. The investigation has been stalled for weeks, in part because DNA recovered from inside Nancy's home was identified as mixed, meaning it contained genetic material from more than one person and could not be cleanly attributed to a single individual. Investigators have confirmed that DNA foreign to Nancy and her family was found, which could potentially belong to whoever entered the home. The problem has been separating it. Renowned genetic genealogist Cece Moore, speaking publicly this week, offered the most detailed public explanation yet of what may be happening behind the scenes. Based on statements from Sheriff Nanos that work involving the DNA was being actively accelerated, Moore theorized that a company which had been planning to release new DNA mixture deconvolution software may have moved up that timeline specifically because of this case. Deconvolution refers to the process of extracting one individual's DNA profile from a mixed sample. Moore described it as one of the most technically challenging problems in modern forensic science. She said several private companies and university researchers are working as fast as they can to improve their ability to handle complex mixtures, and that this case has made it a top priority across the field. She added that investigators may also return to the home to search for additional DNA sources. She noted that DNA can survive for decades, and that the perpetrator, if in the house for the reported 41-minute window, almost certainly left biological material somewhere. A flashlight held in the mouth, saliva near a door frame, a hair on fabric, any of these, she said, could still be present and recoverable. Moore also raised a point about the limitations facing law enforcement in genetic genealogy. The major commercial consumer DNA databases, including the largest ones, do not share their genetic information with investigators. Law enforcement currently works with 3 significantly smaller databases containing fewer than 2 million profiles. Across all consumer DNA platforms, more than 54 million people have been tested. If those larger databases could be accessed, she said cases like this one would resolve far more quickly. She said this case may become the one that forces a legal reckoning over that access. It has not happened yet. The ransom dimension of this case has been one of its most discussed and least resolved elements. Shortly after Nancy's disappearance, media organizations began receiving communications demanding payment in Bitcoin in exchange for her return. A demand of $6 million was made, with a deadline of 5 o'clock in the afternoon on February 9th. The family responded. Savannah Guthrie posted video messages publicly addressed to whoever held her mother, saying the family was ready to talk, that they wanted proof of life, that they were prepared to pay. She said on camera, "We received your message, and we understand. We beg you now to return our mother to us." February 9th passed. No proof of life was ever publicly confirmed. A California man was arrested on federal charges for attempting to impersonate the abductors and extract money from the family under false pretenses. His scheme was determined to be unrelated to the legitimate ransom communications. But his arrest highlighted how quickly bad actors moved to exploit the public grief around this case. The letters themselves have drawn careful attention from analysts. One element widely noted was that certain notes contained specific details about what Nancy was wearing on the night she disappeared, information that had not been publicly released. Law enforcement has not confirmed publicly whether any of the notes received by media organizations were authenticated as genuine communications from whoever actually took her. They have said only that all materials were forwarded to investigators. This week, new notes arrived, again sent to a media organization. One note claimed Nancy was dead. A second note, arriving separately from the same apparent sender, claimed to have seen her alive in the Mexican state of Sonora. The sender reportedly offered to provide more information in exchange for a fraction of a Bitcoin, with additional payment upon a public arrest. The sender acknowledged having been previously dismissed as a scammer by law enforcement. Law enforcement has not commented on the new notes. Whether they contain any information investigators can act on remains unknown. The border theory has been present in this case since the beginning. On February 10th, the same day the FBI released the doorbell camera footage publicly, a search operation was conducted in Rio Rico, Arizona, approximately 60 miles south of Tucson and 10 miles north of the border crossing at Nogales. A person of interest was detained during a traffic stop in that area. He was released after investigators determined he was not connected to the case. The movement of investigators to the border corridor on that specific day, combined with the Bitcoin ransom demand and the note claiming a sighting in Sonora, has kept the Mexico theory active throughout the investigation. United States law enforcement has neither confirmed nor denied it. Investigators have also deployed what are called signal sniffers, specialized equipment capable of detecting low-energy Bluetooth signals at distances beyond what consumer devices can read. Nancy's pacemaker emits a continuous Bluetooth signal when active. The hope was that the device could give away her location if she were within range. As of this broadcast, no confirmed detection of that signal has been publicly reported. Whether that silence means she is beyond range, or that the signal is being physically shielded, or something more difficult to confront, investigators have not said. On April 6th, Savannah Guthrie returned to her anchor desk for the first time in more than 2 months. She did not deliver remarks about the case. She said simply that it was good to be home. Her colleagues welcomed her back. The return was described by those who watched it as one of the more quietly wrenching moments of television this year. She is a professional whose job is to hold composure in front of a camera. She did that, but the absence of her mother's name in that broadcast, the deliberate, practiced quiet of it, said more than any statement could have. In her interview with a colleague aired in late March, Savannah had already said what needed to be said. She described waking up every night. She described the moment her sister called to say Nancy was gone. She said, in a moment that required no editing and no narration, "I just have to say, I'm so sorry, Mommy." She said she is sorry to her siblings. She said she is sorry to her children. She said if her public profile played any role in what happened to her mother, she is sorry for that too. She was not being melodramatic. She was being honest in the way that only people in sustained, unresolved grief can be. The family has offered $1 million for information leading to Nancy's recovery. The FBI has offered an additional $50,000. Investigators have received more than 18,000 tips. Not one of them has produced a named suspect or a confirmed location. The investigation has now moved beyond what any single agency or technology can resolve quickly. DNA analysis is ongoing. Blockchain forensics on the ransom wallet, if there was one, continues. The genetic genealogy databases available to law enforcement are limited by legal restrictions that may not change in time to help this case. The border corridor remains a geographic variable that complicates domestic investigative tools. The sheriff overseeing the case is facing a recall effort, allegations from his own deputies, and public questions from the county's supervisors who oversee his office. None of those complications mean the case cannot be solved. they mean it has not been yet. Nancy Guthrie was born on January 27, 1942 in Fort Wright, Kentucky. She has lived in the Tucson area for more than 50 years. She lost her husband when he was only 49 years old and raised her 3 children largely on her own. She attended virtual church on Sunday mornings. She ordered her own Uber rides. She watched her children build their lives, and she built her own. The FBI tip line is 1-800-CAL-FBI. Tips can be submitted anonymously at tips.fbi.gov. The $1 million reward from the Guthrie family remains active. As of this broadcast, she has been missing for 68 days. No one has publicly answered for it.